What's up, everyone? It's Karthik with MoneyVest, and what an incredible sell-off in the markets. NASDAQ here shedding over 3% on the day. We got the S&P 500 down over 1.4%, and surprisingly, of course, the Dow Jones was pushing higher on the day. It was up over 200 points or pushing up over 65 basis points on the day here, with Nvidia, of course, having its worst day since March 2020 and having the biggest market cap loss in the US public market history, selling off over $600 billion after the Chinese AI startup DeepSeek news that came out over the last couple days. And we've been covering that on the channel here over the last few days as well. So you got lots to discuss, lots to cover. We do have a lot of earnings coming out later this week, as well as FOMC scheduled for January 29th. This is going to be a Wednesday. And in this video, I'm going to break down everything you need to know, as well as Tom Lee, who was on CNBC earlier today, 6 hours ago, talking about how this is a massive overreaction, and Nvidia is still a very, very strong leader in artificial intelligence, and their GPUs are still going to be needed in building a lot of these large language models. For a lot of these hyperscalers, they're still going to require Nvidia's high-end, more advanced GPUs. And Trump also calling for this being a wake-up call for a lot of American companies, as they are competing now on par with DeepSeek's large language models as well. So this right here was a state of the market. We did see a lot of consolidation sideways, and the markets did recover a little bit going into the close, because at one point we were down over 4% for the NASDAQ and down over 2.5% for the S&P 500. So a little bit of a recovery there, and my portfolio was struggling, down over $17,000. This is not even including for the options portfolio unrealized loss, which was closer to $11,000, and I still have to wait and see until my option on Nvidia, which is a covered call, gets repriced, because that is expiring in September. And so right now, of the $15,000, it was only up $5,000 to $6,000. So I still have about $10,000 worth of premium left in that covered call, which is not yet fully priced in. And so as soon as it gets to getting priced in, then hopefully the portfolio is going to climb back up. The options portfolio I'm talking about. So all in all, unrealized loss for the day was closer to 30 grand, which was insane, absolutely incredible. I think one of my biggest single day losses for the market. Definitely is very brutal day today, for sure. So Nvidia shares, shed almost $600 billion in market cap, biggest one-day loss in U.S. history, and Nvidia lost close to $600 billion market cap on Monday, the biggest drop for any company on a single day in U.S. history. The chipmaker stock price plummeted 17% to close at $118.58. Like I was extremely busy the entire day, because I was driving my family around. I was taking care of my nephews. I was babysitting as my family was attending the concert. And so I was driving and babysitting all the time. And so every chance I could get and look at the actual markets and see where Nvidia is trading, I was like, it's down another percentage. It's down another percentage point, another percentage point, and another one, and another one. And it's just like keeps going down. There's no buyers stepping in. There's absolutely no bids coming in, and at the end of the day, like being down over 17% in a single day is absolutely crazy for a $3 trillion stock. And so this is literally trading like a penny stock, being down over 17%. So one more thing I wanted to mention, which we were kind of speculating from the beginning in one of my previous videos as well. So Alexander Wang, who is Scale AI's CEO, whose company provides training data to key AI players including OpenAI, Google, and Meta, said Thursday at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, that DeepSeek, the leading Chinese AI lab, released an earth-shattering model on Christmas Day, then followed it up with a powerful reasoning focus model, which is the DeepSeek R1, which is comparable to OpenAI's recently released O1 model. He says, and I quote, "What we found is that DeepSeek is the top performing, or roughly on par with the best American models. However, this is also what's being described as an artificial intelligence race between the US and China as an AI war," and adding that he believes China has significantly more NVIDIA H100 GPUs, AI chips that are widely used to build leading powerful AI models, than people may think, especially considering US export controls. So I think the biggest risk factor is coming from the very idea that China is building this on a very less powerful and inferior product. So you know how there is, so let me give you a very simple example of why or what is going on. You know how there's the S&P 500, right? Every year, the hedge funds and the big money managers and institutional investors and almost all investors are going to peg your returns against the S&P 500, right? So S&P 500 is the benchmark where everyone's going to be comparing against. Did you beat the S&P 500 or did you not beat the S&P 500? Were your returns higher or lower than the S&P 500? So what's happening now is that let's call the S&P 500 like American companies, okay? American companies. Like that's what American AI companies are, the S&P 500, for example. Now, what DeepSeek has done is that it has matched or slightly outperformed the S&P 500 with the key component risk. And in this case, it's cost and in terms of the chips that they're using. And so that's where the uncertainty and the risk is coming from, that they've been able to, in other words, the analogy that we're using, able to beat the S&P 500 with a lot less risk, right? Or either match the S&P 500, so they're producing the same results, the same returns with a lot less risk. And so that's where a lot of this fear and panic is coming from, that they're able to do that with, cheaply and less expensive chips and inferior products. And so that is what's causing a lot of fear. However, as Scale AI CEO Alexander Wang says, that he believes that China already has significantly more H100 GPUs than many people believe it to be because of the export controls. And so if that is true, then you've got a cost and you got production and the efficiency of those chips on par with American companies, and there's no leverage. There is literally no advantage that DeepSeek has over other AI manufacturers. The only advantage they would have had or are argued to have is a lower cost and a significantly inferior product, inferior chips that they're using to build a superior product. So that's where a lot of that uncertainty is coming from. Now, Tom Lee, amid all of this, said that this was a quote-unquote overreaction at a scale close to 2020 pandemic sparked sell-off. And he also had a whole video, 5.5-minute video on CNBC, which I watched and took a lot of notes. And so these were all of my notes from Tom Lee and what he says about this current sell-off. He says that markets don't like uncertainty, they like certainty, as of course, as we already know. This is an overreaction, he says. This is the worst decline since March 2020 for Nvidia. That ended up being a huge opportunity for investors. So March 2020 ended up being a huge opportunity for a lot of these stocks, including Nvidia. And he says that this is going to look like a huge opportunity later down the road for Nvidia once again. And it's not a fun day, but I'd be looking at this as an opportunity, he says. And he says, and I quote, "I'd personally be surprised if Nvidia became BetMax in the past week." So what he's talking about is he'd personally be surprised if Nvidia became obsolete in the past week. So BetMax is one of those cassette tapes that people used. And, we used to use that, put it into a Walkman or something that can actually have cassette discs and, of course, listen to music or watch movies or whatever. And that eventually became obsolete with CDs and then eventually with DVDs. And long behold, we don't use any hardware anymore to watch movies or stream music. So he said he'd personally be surprised if Nvidia became BetMax in the past week and became so obsolete that there is literally no GPUs required to create these large language models. So that would be the kind of change required to justify the sell-off, is that Nvidia's chip dominance is still very strong. Unless there's a new model that doesn't require GPUs at all, markets generally does fire, ready, aim. So basically they fire first, ready, and aim later. So that's what markets do. That was a good analogy from Tom Lee, is markets, they fire off first and then they discuss and decide and think later, evaluate later. It's just get it done, get these positions out of the portfolio, out of the books, and then we can decide and ready and aim later. So that's what markets do. And there was a good question from Scott at CNBC. What if all this AI spend that is pledged does not come true? There's a lot of companies pledging hundreds of billions of dollars in spend for artificial intelligence. What if all of this does not come true? What if this AI bubble starts to completely bust? And for that, Tom Lee said that if Nvidia was trading at 100 PE, or a lot of these stocks were trading at 100, 200, 300 times PE with little to no revenues or cash flows, that would have been true. But 30 times PE with a company that's generating a lot of cash flow and revenue, it is not very demanding for investors. And he says, I've been researching companies for over 34 years. A 22 times PE is actually not demanding for max 7. If S&P closes above 58.81, that was a very specific price point, by the end of this week, we can have a double-digit gain for this year as well. And one of the sectors that he says it looks very attractive despite this market sell-off is financials. And financials I've actually been considering myself. VFH is a Vanguard Financials ETF. That's the one that I've been considering myself. He says it looks very good for this year, remains our number one pick for the year. Markets tend to overreact, and this is going to prove to be a buying opportunity for Nvidia. So there's definitely a lot to be discussed, and look, nobody's going to have all the answers for you. This is still a developing story, but look, market doesn't like any uncertainty, and that's why, we sold off as aggressively as we did today, and a lot of that money went into safety. Safety meaning the Dow stocks, including Apple, including the bond market. A lot of these places kind of had a lot of inflow of liquidity. So if you come over to our MoneyVest platform, so if you reload this page, we end up closing at around 3.15, despite, of course, getting a lot of buyers to step in. And then if you come over to, let's see, so this is not updated yet. So we're still closer to low threes. My team is working on fixing this right now. So if you come over to, let's say, the market snapshot, you'll notice again, technology, semiconductors down almost 14%, collectively down almost 14%. And of course, we had technology down over 40 basis points. We had automobiles, we had electric equipment, utilities, all of this selling off. And there was, again, a lot of stocks like Apple, for example, up 3%, Berkshire Hathaway, Walmart. We had Costco, we had Home Depot. So a lot of retail, a lot of recession-proof stocks and utilities. That's where money went to. So this entire market was not as brutal. It's just, of course, my portfolio, because it's primarily Tesla, Nvidia, Palantir, VUG, which is your Vanguard Growth ETF, NASDAQ, so to speak. So that's why there's a lot of selling pressure for those companies, and a lot of that money is going more towards staples and financials and utilities, and that's why it's a very, very rotation of capital on the day to safety. That's what it is. It's like flight to quality, and people are really just kind of risk averse right now on the day after this news. If you come over to the market calendar, we do have, like I said, a lot of earnings scheduled for later this week. We've got companies like Raytheon and Starbucks and Boeing and Lockheed Martin reporting tomorrow. So a lot of defense contractors. And later this week, we got Microsoft and Meta, Tesla, Apple, Visa, Amazon, Clack Corporation, MasterCard, ExxonMobil, Chevron, AbbVie, so on and so forth. And of course, Wednesday, the 29th, is when we have our FOMC meeting. So this right here is going to be the interest rate decision, the first FOMC meeting, first time Jerome Powell takes the stage after Trump's inauguration and becoming the president. So going back over to where we are from a technical analysis standpoint, before we get there, just a few more things I wanted to mention is Tom Lee talking about this decline is understandable. Markets overreact to bad news. Small caps financials holding up by the dip moment for Nvidia. Fundstrat's top market ideas continue to be technology, industrials, financials, small caps, and Bitcoin. And Fundstrat's top stock ideas, of course, Nvidia, Amazon, JP Morgan, Meta, and Google. And these are the stocks that were getting absolutely mauled today on the day here, selling off very, very aggressively. On a market concentration basis, the losses were reduced down to under $800 billion. At one point, this was down over 1.2, 1.3 trillion. And the Magnificent Seven collectively down 653 billion. The Big Three down 556 billion. And so that $600 billion loss for Nvidia, it's just insane. It's massive. And Broadcom here down over 205 billion, even though it was down more than Nvidia on a percentage basis, because the market cap is a lot less. It was only down 205 billion, only I say in relative to Nvidia, of course. Oracle down 72 billion, Google 100 billion. We got Tesla 33 billion, Microsoft 70 billion, Arista Networks 37 billion. It's literally billions. There is no less than billions for these stock sell-offs. So coming over to the market, S&P 500 having a huge gap down, and then of course buyers stepping in. However, this is going to now turn into a resistance for S&P 500. So it's possible that, we get rejected here also. Again, this week is very critical. We've got the Fed, we've got the earnings, we got a lot of things to look forward to. So this is a very important resistance going into tomorrow, going into later this week. That's going to be 6,000, 6,020, 6,030. And if you get rejected here, the next support obviously is going to be 58.34. And that's what Tom Lee also mentioned, that if he closes above 58.81 by the end of this week, the market have a very strong probability of having a double-digit return for this year. So we'll see if you're able to close above 58.81, which is still all the way down here. I mean, S&P 500 would really have to drop quite a bit in order to get down to 58.81. So we're talking, for it to be at 58.81, it would need to hold up at least another 2.2%. But you never know. You never know what kind of selling pressure we can get from these earnings, as well as the FOMC. And there's going to be a lot of questions around this DeepSeek's AI model in these earnings calls. So it's kind of an interesting timing that they're coming out. The news came out literally right before the week of this big tech earnings. And so now we're going to learn more about what the U.S. officials, at least the CEOs of high AI, high-tech, big tech companies, think about this new Chinese AI startup, as well as the significant amount of spend that they're doing on artificial intelligence. So resistance is going to stay put at 6,000, 6,020. So inside this red rectangle, and support level is going to stay put at 5,800, 5,900 for the market. Coming over to the NASDAQ, and NASDAQ getting a little bit of that validation from that support that we talked about. So a perfect gap down here, support level getting validated as perfectly as it can at 19,200 as we discussed. We've got a huge gap to fill over here. And of course, if it continues to sell off, if we do see a breakdown below this, then 18,670 is going to be another level to keep in mind. I mean, such a huge gap down for the market. I mean, this is insane. This is crazy how uncertain and how volatile the markets can be with staircases up and then, elevators down. And this was a clear representation of the elevator coming down. Volatility here was as high as 22, and then of course getting sold all the way back down to 17, 18 levels here. So we got up to as much as the 70th percentile, still a normal reading, but we were up over 40 to 50% at one point, getting sold all the way back down to 17, 18 levels, and Bitcoin is back above 102, 103,000 right now for Bitcoin, and of course for Ether. If you take a quick look, Ether is also back up to over $3,200 right now, with crude oil sitting right at that support of $73, $74 per barrel. And finally, the 10-year treasuries are sitting at just under 4.5%. Again, have come down quite a bit as TLT, which is the bond ETF, has rallied quite a bit on this rotation out from equities over to the bond market. More from a riskier perspective over to a risk-averse and a more safe place in the market. So coming over to individual stocks, starting with Apple, very nice momentum back up over 3%. We talked about this from a swing trading standpoint, given that it was trading down to a very attractive support. I mentioned this quite a few times in my previous updates that Apple is coming down to some very attractive levels, given that it's down over 15% from its all-time highs in a quote-unquote correction. And there's a very high probability that it starts to rally back up, given how oversold it currently is. And so next target remains at 236 up to as much as 243. And a nice 3% move on the day here. Amazon, on the other hand, also got bought up, so it was green on the day, which is actually very, very nice to see. We did gap down quite a bit, and then of course buyers stepped in for Amazon to close green. So that's actually very strong recovery for Amazon. Tesla, on the other hand, green candle, but by a very small margin, only down 2.3% here, and continues to sell off, down back under $400 a share. And we've been talking about this on the channel before, that there's a huge resistance for Tesla at 430. If you're not able to break out above 430, I don't see any reason for Tesla to be higher and breaking out and seeing that continuation. So there's a lot of supply, a lot of resistance sitting for Tesla in and around those levels, and support level is going to stay put at 374, 375 to be precise. Let's come over to the biggest drop of the day. Nvidia down almost 17%. Look at that candle, just getting crushed after a lot of this consolidation. One candle taking out multiple support levels in a day. Resistance is going to stay put at 127 now, and we got a huge support area in the 117, 118. There's a lot of demand in and around these levels, but anything is possible with this kind of market. It's possible that we break down further and we come down to low 100. So I would mentally be prepared for that kind of scenario for the markets as well. So anything is possible. Like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty, and so low 100s is also possible for Nvidia. Resistance is going to stay put at 127, and support level right about here, 117, 118. Coming over to Palantir, also getting bought up here, but down over 4.5%, almost 4.5% on the day. Got rejected here, on Friday at $81, $82, as we discussed in our previous update. Sold off all the way down to these levels, and support level is going to stay put right about here at this higher low. And of course, another support down at $70 for Palantir as well. Coming over to SOFI, and SOFI here also getting crushed after the earnings, down over 10%. And next support level is going to stay put down at $14.94, $15 per share. Resistance all the way up to as much as $17.21 for SOFI, up to as much as $18. And again, we've talked about this, given how overbought it was on a 4-hour chart. It was a little bit more normal for us to see that pullback, and for us to see that profit taking for SOFI as well. So support level is going to stay up at $14, $15 for this company moving forward. Talking a little bit about advanced micro devices, and AMD also selling off here, down over 6% with a huge gap down. And semiconductors, all in all, were down collectively. If you come take a look, and if you just plug in semiconductors, they were down over $800 billion. Oh my God, down almost 14%. This is an insane sell-off. $850 billion across the board for all semiconductor companies and stocks. I mean, SMH down over 9.8% in one day. In one day, it's just unheard of. I mean, this is just incredible. If you can live through this, you can live through anything in the market. That's what I have to say, because these are all interesting experiences, right? I mean, you don't get to see this every day. It's just incredible how much markets can sell off in one single day. And AMD, of course, down 6%, trading at that support of 112, 113, 114 for advanced micro devices. And coming over to PayPal and Visa. So PayPal over here was also getting rejected there at this resistance. So gap down, had some buyers stepping in, up over 1.2%, back up to over $90 a share. And this right here is going to be that area of supply and that area of resistance for PayPal. Support level is going to sit at $84, $85 at the moment. Coming over to Visa. And Visa here continues to break out to new all-time highs, up over 1.3%, coming up to its target of 335, 336, and that was exactly inside this uptrending channel that we had identified in our previous videos. Now I would be a lot more careful for Visa, considering the overbought conditions on the RSI, the MACD, and the L3 banker oscillator. So there's definitely a very overstretched technicals on Visa right now. Coming over to Meta platforms, and Meta here continues to break out, up almost 2%. To new all-time highs at 659, continues to trade inside this uptrending channel. It's going to now, in my opinion, start to find a little bit of that resistance there, and support level is going to stay up roughly at 638, down to as low as $600 for Meta. Coming over to Netflix, and Netflix here consolidating sideways. You got a gap to fill on the downside, resistance staying put at just under $1,000, and support level at $809, $810 for Netflix. Google here selling off, down over 4%, consolidating sideways. Resistance all the way up to $202, and support level at $183 for Google. And I do believe that this is a bigger threat for other AI models than it is for the company providing the GPUs and the chips, because their business is still going to be there. I mean, they're still needing, they still want to, they're still going to be selling chips and GPUs for these hyperscalers that are building these large language models. So DeepSeek is, in my opinion, a bigger threat to companies like Meta, like Google, like OpenAI, than it is to Nvidia. Now, of course, there's always this speculation that what if the cost comes down so much that these are so efficient, so powerful, that you don't really need that many GPUs, and you don't really need to spend a lot of that money. So the quantity and the price both comes down, and that hurts Nvidia's business. And I think that's the biggest reason why Nvidia is selling off today is, what people are starting to think or forecast or speculate is that since DeepSeek's model was so much cheaper and so much better, you don't really need to spend that much, and you don't really need to have that much in order to build at that quality. But then again, it's purely speculation. We don't really know what kind of technology and what kind of money was spent on DeepSeek's R1, which was released. That was the model that's everybody's going crazy over. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of unknowns here, and market, like Tom Lee said, fires and then readies and then aims. So it fires first and then evaluates and aims later. Resistance is going to be $202 for Google, support level 183 at the moment. And then finally coming over to Microsoft, getting bought up here intraday, had a huge gap down, still down 2%. And this is going to be a resistance for Microsoft right now. Moving forward, that's going to be sitting in the 430s to as much as 440s for Microsoft. So that is going to be those levels to keep in mind. And finally, we come over to Enphase and Costco. And Enphase here consolidating sideways, getting rejected at this resistance of $64, $65. And then finally, Costco getting a lot of buyers to step in. Huge breakout above $961, back up to $965. Massive candle, 2.7% gain, and support level is going to stay put right about here at 961. So hope you all enjoyed this video and a complete update on the markets. Make sure that you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Again, there is an additional 20% discount if you want to take advantage of that. Only $19 a month. You get access to everything, including the trade alerts, buy and sell alerts, options portfolio, as well as the members only videos and engaging with Discord. Over thousands of members over there as well. As always, happy investing. I'll see you all in the next video.